Welcome to Athletes on Balance, where we talk to athletes, coaches, and experts about mental health in sports. This is a stigma-free zone for inner thoughts and outer conversations. We're helping athletes and anyone with mental health challenges perform at their best, both on and off the field.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Athletes on Balance. I'm your host, Walt Norley, and I'm the founder and CEO of On Balance Health. Today, I'm honored to host one of the greatest coaches in college basketball, Jay Wright, former head basketball coach for 21 seasons at Villanova University before retiring in 2022. I'm going to list some of your accolades, Jay. If I went through everything, we'd take up half this podcast. So I'm going to give a little bit of a Cliff Notes version, if you don't mind. Won 2 national championships within a 3-year period of time, a 2-time Naismith National Coach of the Year. He was the assistant coach for the 2021 U.S. Olympic gold medal. He's in the Naismith Hall of Fame and many, many, many more accolades and awards. I think one of the most impressive things I learned about you is that you were a star for the Southampton Knights 80-pound Cup winner team that supposedly beat my Warrington AA Warriors, although I don't know how you find the record of that. And then you went on to star at Council Rock, both baseball, point guard and basketball, quarterback and football, before moving into your collegiate career as a point guard and a captain on the Bucknell University team. And as we keep rolling with this, you're a New York Times bestselling author with the book Developing the Mindset on and Off the Court, which I think is a good segue into our discussion. Thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate it.
Great to be with you, Walt. I love what you're doing. This is just as interesting to me, and from our conversations, I've learned a lot, so I hope I can be a little helpful today.
Well, I think actually just to some degree, the title of your book, right? I mean, it's going in, you understand the whole mind, body, togetherness, and you can't separate the two. Let's talk a little bit about, I'm in this world, as you know, for a couple, 3 years now, and not my words, the word crisis is used all the time. There's a mental health crisis going on in collegiate athletics, and the numbers are going this way and not this way, right? There's an escalation, which calls for a lot of things that need to be provided for resolution, which we'll get to. What do you think the reasons for this quote unquote crisis that's going on within collegiate athletics?
Well, I think it is a really important issue. And early in our career, this just became very apparent to me and important to me with the guys I was coaching. And there wasn't a lot to study about it, but I got very interested in it early in my career. And now as we've progressed and society has progressed, I think it's an issue, as we know, in society as a whole, this mental health crisis. And then that, from what I've seen during my coaching, whatever's going on in society that way, especially with young people, gets exacerbated in sports because you're out in the public eye,
Right.
highly visible position. And for young people, you're being evaluated all the time on your success as an athlete, the level that you play, the amount of social media hits you get. There's so much pressure on these young people, and it's changed from just the joy of playing sports and the joy of being on a team. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just saying it's where we are, and our society has elevated sports to that level. And now we've got, high school athletes at 15, 16 years old, have social media followings. They have commercials. They're being recruited. They have a lot of media to deal with. So I just think our society has changed in that way, that sports isn't just a fun activity that you enjoy developing and you enjoy being a part of something bigger than yourself, it's become a sense of entertainment and a great challenge for young people to prove themselves.
But then everything comes to this, right? I mean, everything goes on this, and you have the onset. I don't know what had happened in the last 6 months where they've legalized gambling in college
Yeah,
athletics.
yeah.
What's your perspective on that added pressure and organized social bullying that can come from that?
I was amazed, and it was about. So I've been out of coaching now. This is my 4th year. So I would say it was about 6 years ago. Um, I remember after a game, I remember the player, Jermaine Samuels, who's played a little bit in the NBA, was on our Final Four team in 22. We came home from a late night game, and it was about 2 o'clock in the morning, and we got off the bus, and it was cold out, and I saw him walking back to his dorm. So I just picked him up, and we were just talking on the way back, and he mentioned about getting back to the dorm and being relieved that we won the game and no one was going to be on his back about us losing. And I said, what, why does that bother you so much? And he said, because these guys bet a lot on the games. And when we lose, they get all over us. And he goes, it's not
Is
just,
that right?
yeah. And this was about 6 years ago.
Wow.
And I really had not, I was always looking for um, ways to learn about what's going on inside each one of our players' heads. And I really took pride in that because we spent a lot of time on that. And I was shocked that I didn't know that was a bit. I mean, for him to say that to me going home after a game
Cool.
that we won, I was just shocked that I didn't know about that. So he said, look, when you get on social media afterwards, you see they're killing you on social media and they DM you and complain about losing a bet, the mistakes I made or a turnover. I was like, wow, I never knew you guys were going through that. So we started addressing that, but that was about 2020. That was in my last 2 or 3 years. So I know that has expanded and it's become even more of an issue for these guys now. And now you see with
It's
prop
legal.
bets, it's
Yeah.
impacted these kids, getting pressured to do things, so they can win on prop bets. So it's a big part of their lives now.
You achieved a lot, Jay, but it's the way you did it, right? I mean, you had a philosophy, and I'd like you to speak to it. Your leadership philosophy of developing, you know, championship elite play along with the development of the human being for life after sports.
Our goal was to make each young man that we recruited become the best student, the best basketball player, and the best person he could be. And if we did that with each guy and they graduated in 4 years, reached their full potential as a basketball player and spiritually and sociologically became the best person they could be, then we did our job and we could watch them go into the world with pride. And that's what we always did. And we were really blessed that doing that, we won 2 national championships. That's why I look at our goal was never to win the national championships. It was to make each young man the best he could be academically, socially, and spiritually.
So, we're talking about mental health here, and we chatted about this the other day. You had a full-time psychologist. You had, a remarkable team chaplain who we spoke about with, Father Rob, who I've had on this podcast, and you were blessed with that. But you also brought up something that I thought was interesting, and that was the EQ element. So having people within your organization, including you, with an EQ mentality of being able to make sure that whether it was yourself or others, identifying issues that were going on with some of your players. So I think you were ahead of your time. Again, I'm now in this business, and I can tell you there's a small percentage. It's growing, Jay, but it's still a small percentage that have this mentality. I mean, they're seeing the successes of you and guys like Coach Saban, et cetera. But it's the adoption, I don't think is, it's not rapid fire. So how did you get there, and that mentality is something that was instilled in you as a younger coach?
I think it first hit me when I was a head coach at Hofstra and I took over a team when there were 302 Division I teams in the country. We were 295 out of 302. I did realize very early in my career there that I had a bunch of great guys and really good guys, and they they really weren't. Some of them should not have been at that level, but they were giving me everything they got, and we were 7-20. We were going through the season, and I realized they can't give me any more. So if we're just evaluating ourselves on whether we win or lose, we're going to be miserable every day, and we're not going to win. They're coming every day with a great attitude. They're listening. We compete every night. It just comes down the stretch that the other teams got better players, and they're well coached also. So we're not winning, but we're giving everything we got, and we started to evaluate ourselves each game on our attitude and our effort, not on whether we won or lost the game, because we weren't going to win. And there was no reason being miserable when you're just giving everything you got. And then I started to realize like this is really all we have control of. As we started to get better, I started to see that it really doesn't matter. And sometimes we're the talented team now, but we're not playing with great effort and great attitude, and we're winning the score, but we're not reaching our potential.
Right.
And so we shouldn't be just evaluating ourselves on the results, but our commitment to being the best player, best person, best student we could be. And then as a team together, coming out of ourselves and playing for each other, we started to develop a system where we graded that out on film, and we gave what we called attitude points. And we would evaluate the best player given how he did the little things for his teammates rather than being the best scorer. And he was the most valuable player of that game and the most valuable player on our team. As you scored higher in attitude points, you became more valued within our program.
Wow. So you take that mentality and you take that philosophy, and you're probably doing some of the best coaching you've coached, because you don't necessarily have the talent that then you take that mentality, and then you go to Villanova and you're able to get that athlete, that step up from an athletic perspective, right, from a skill set standpoint,
Right.
and marrying that same mindset with that attitude that you had from these guys you were keeping score on. Did you
Right.
do that at Villanova?
Yes.
Did you?
Well,
Yeah.
and at Hofstra, we actually got better and better each year, and we realized how reaching your potential individually and as a group. When we started winning, there was one point in Hofstra, and we were there 7 years. In our 6th year, that we had 26 home wins in a row, and they started counting those. We had the longest home winning streak in the country at one time.
Yeah.
But we started to realize like everybody else was counting the way we got that streak was not by counting how many home games we won, but by each game, just trying to reach our potential, regardless of the score, and evaluating ourselves on that. And if it led to the longest streak, fine. And having the players understand that going into the game, thinking about can we keep the streak alive,
Right.
was doing nothing to actually help us achieve that goal.
Right.
It
Right.
was going into the game thinking we're going to give our best effort for each other and accept our destiny.
It's interesting. Mental health has got such a big umbrella to it, right? What is mental health? And you go through mental strength. What's the definition of mental strength? You use the word attitude, and you were essentially grading and measuring, an individual's attitude and looking at that as a form of success. seems to me that would marry up with somebody's mental health, the ability to ride the ups and downs, right? The ability to manage anxiety that happens, performance anxiety, um, and the attitudes, which is your mental health
Yeah,
well-being, right? We're all, take the athlete out of the equation. We're all having a better day when we're managing better between the ears, right? And
exactly, exactly.
you picked that up very early. I applaud that.
It was it was so important to us. So if you ask, it's very clear to any of our former players. If you ask them what was the most important thing or what was the foundation of your entire program, on our walls in our practice facility, there were no former jerseys of NBA players. There were no national championships, no Big East. It was plain blank walls. It said the word attitude behind each basket. And on the side of the walls, it just said, play hard, play together, play smart, play with pride. That was
Wow.
it. There was nothing else on the walls. And we felt like that's what we controlled, playing hard, our effort, our togetherness, thinking of other people, how our actions affected other people, smart, understanding what we're trying to accomplish together, and pride being it's not about me, it's about being a part of something bigger than myself. And that's all we ever talked about. And
Yeah.
we had a saying before you came into the practice facility. There weren't a lot of sayings or quotes either, but there was the last one you would see before you would walk into the practice facility was, we practice to create habits to make us successful in the most difficult situations. Because when you're under stress, you're going to resort to your habits and you're going to resort to your core values because you don't have time to think. So
Right.
we had to teach our players mentally how we wanted to react when bad situations came up. So in practice, we did everything competitively. There was always a winner and loser. But what we measured the most was how everybody responded to every negative play, a bad call, a turnover. And if you didn't respond in the proper way, and we taught them how to respond, your response was clap your hands and say the word attitude. That's a way of telling your teammates, look, I made a mistake. I'm over it. I'm on to the next play, and I have a clear head on the next play, and you can trust me. If someone wasn't responding that way, it was your teammate's job to turn and look at you and say, hey, attitude, which meant, hey, you just screwed up. I'm with you. I got your back, but you got to get out of your own head right now. And you got to have a clear head on the next play. And I need to be able to trust you. So if you didn't do that in practice each time, it was an attitude point for the other team. So it had to become your habit of responding. You had to teach a response. You can't just say, hey, when you're in trouble, say attitude. You
Right.
had to
Right.
make that a habit every day. And we wanted them to we knew basketball was important to them as young people, but we wanted them to take that into life. On your next day, your next meeting, you got to clear your head. You can't be impacted on what happened previously. You got to have a clear mind and confidence to take on the next challenge.
So well, I think it's a lifetime mentality that you have there from a leadership philosophy, and we can all pull something from it. Do you have any kind of example situation, Jay, that without obviously naming any names, do you have anybody that you can think of that got themselves into a situation, whether it was, you know, down on themselves, depressed on themselves, anxiety, performance related, that you guys were able to identify in some form? And how did you identify it? And what actually took place to get the person into the right attitude?
Now, there's a lot of examples, and I remember one of our players specifically, who we worked very closely with, and our team psychologist would watch guys all the time and how they reacted. And we had a very open culture. We talked about mental health all the time. And in one of our guys, we found out that he had a lot of anxiety issues, and he was the last guy you would think of. He was the most clutch guy we ever had. I was shocked when he told me this, and it was actually in the off season. He found some of these issues and told me about it, that he would get anxiety at certain times in the off season. So he said to me, the way they've taught him to deal with it during the in season was come over to the bench, just get water, clear his mind, think about the water going into his mouth, going into his body. Don't think about what's going on in his mind. So I remember, as we would wait for a game to start and the music was playing, like jump, jump, and the place was going crazy. We're waiting for the TV to say start the game. He'd run over to the bench and get a drink of water. And I knew that's what he was going through. So I'd try to talk to him about something else just to get his mind off his anxiety. So that was an extreme example, but getting to know what guys were going through was so valuable to us, and giving them a platform to be comfortable and share it with other players to let them know that, hey, this guy is struggling with this. He's the least guy that you think would do that. He's our most clutch guy, and he's struggling with it and overcoming it. We can all have it. We can all overcome it. And we all can deal with it, and don't be embarrassed to deal with it.
So he was having non-performance anxiety as well, you said. And so
Yes.
this, again, in terms of a life skill, I mean, you were helping him, it sounds like you helped him that helped him stay in the moment, right? He was just focusing on drinking the water.
Yeah. And I want to say one thing about this, Walt, and I'm sure you study this more, and anybody that's interested in this, I'm fascinated by this. If our player, this player, didn't give the okay to the psychiatrist to share that information with me, I would not have known what he's doing. So
Right.
on our campus, we had, amongst our team, we had spiritually Father Rob Hagan. We had a psychologist, Dr. Jim Brennan, who was on our staff. So our players kind of knew if they went to him that it was probably going to get shared, unless they told him specifically not to, but they usually wouldn't go to him unless they knew they want it shared. But then we had an on-campus psychiatrist, Dr. Joan Whitney, that when they went to her, a lot of times they didn't want to share things. But the ability to have the doctors encourage the players to share with the coaches or share what they're going through, I thought was really important, or I would have never known what he was doing. I might have thought, like, why are you coming over to the bench? Get out there. We're going to start. The game's going to start in a second.
Right.
Get out there. But I knew what he was doing because we shared the information. I think knowing the relationship with coaches and trusting that they're going to handle that information properly is really important. That communication with psychiatrists, psychologists, and spiritual leaders.
You set up this is actually a common thing today when people have a progressive program and see the values of mind, body, spirit, whether it's for life setup or it's for sports performance. You created that culture though, and that culture essentially said, we want you to be well and you're safe getting help. There's not a judgment here. If you hurt your knee or your shoulder or your ankle, you'd go get help, right? And we've got an environment here that you can go get help if you're feeling a certain way, up, down, or sideways. But that's a culture. And I see it. I see it right now that the people that, and this is just the nature of sports and we help with this. Actually, we're data intelligence, AI, the ability to correlate that, whether it's academic performance, athletic performance, frankly, maybe relationships, et cetera. I mean, there are ways now that are happening that you can start measuring outcomes by the fact that people are in an environment that allows them to get care and
Yeah.
encourages. What I just heard is you encouraged it actually, right?
Well, that's what's fascinating about what you're doing. At the time, we didn't have any empirical data to show what we were doing was right. Ours was based on the fact that the the initial recruitment was based on number one, we want you to grow to be the most important, grow to be the best person you can be. Your overall development as a person is what's most important to us. Part of you as a person is what kind of student you are and what kind of athlete you are, but also what kind of friend you are, what kind of son you are, what kind of brother you are.
Right.
That's really important to us too. So when they trust that, they have more of an ability to trust you when they are struggling, that you really want what's best for them. And when they're young, especially, when you get them at 17, 18 to 22, they really just want to be the best basketball player they can be. They want to be a pro.
Right.
But when they understand that you're caring for them is actually making them a better person and it's actually making them a better player, they start to get that it takes a different amount of time with each guy to get to that point. And I always would tell them in the beginning, right now you're listening to me as a freshman because you're respectful of me as a coach. Our goal is to get to a point where you trust I know what's best for you and you're going to tell me what you really think. You're not going to just agree with me because I'm the coach. We're going to go from a respectful relationship to an authentic relationship where you could say to me, Coach, I have this problem, or Coach, I disagree with you. And you can trust that our relationship's authentic, but it takes time to build that. And everybody goes at a different speed.
Again, just pullaways here. We talked about the word, emotional intelligence the other day, the EQ stuff. And we're talking about some coaches, et cetera. But it sounds like you're almost, you probably, we all know some people have, higher, EQs than others, right? And a little bit probably in the natural DNA, but sounds like you were also, fostering that, right? Their emotional intelligence to again, the higher your emotional intelligence to understand what's going on and how you deal with it, the healthier and the attitude's going to be better, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
We talked about all of these things that we're talking about. We talked about with our players probably as much as X's and O's. I was going to say more, but you spend so much time on the court.
Yeah.
But if you talk about in meetings, what we talked about emotional IQ, personal relationships, your actions, how they impact others, more in meetings than we did X's and O's. And a guy that's a great example, is a guy like Kyle Lowry. We had who's playing in his 20th year in the NBA. And again, you have empirical data on this stuff. I don't. I would love to have it on him. I say he's in the NBA for 20 years because obviously he's very talented. He is very intelligent and he's got incredible emotional IQ. Yet, in recruiting him, and he would admit this, he was the worst student of any student we recruited out of high school.
Wow.
If you look at just his grades and his commitment to academics. But we knew, so he would have never got into Villanova on his own.
Right.
But in meeting with him and spending time with him, you knew he was really intelligent. You could use the word streetwise, but he was also incredibly high emotional IQ. And it proved out when he got to Villanova because he handled everything extremely well, was there 2 years, drafted first round, has been in the NBA for 20 years, went through a lot of struggles, won an NBA championship, led the USA team to a gold medal because of his emotional IQ. And I remember Mike Krzyzewski telling me that he kept the team together because he was the superstar that would come off the bench and convince the other guys to just worry about their roles and not their stardom. But it was his emotional IQ that really led him and has led him to the career he has. And I just think that's so valuable. And we would spend a lot of time teaching our guys that and spending time on letting them know the value of emotional IQ and letting them know they were much brighter than maybe their grades indicated.
I love that. I do. Given what I'm immersed in right now, I love it because what you said there, it also, and we talked about this a little bit. We were talking about coaches the other day, but it, and again, I think it's outside of sports as well. I think it's a big part of leadership, right? So my guess is he became a very strong leader. Um,
Incredible.
yeah, yeah, because you pick up everybody else's situation and you understand it and you try to talk to them about it and they respect that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the interesting things that's coming about, you start looking at uh, modern science. I have been really impressed as I get into this world with, in some programs, how sophisticated their sports science programs are. They collect some really interesting data. They've figured out how to make it actionable, with baselines and so forth for athleticism. We're bringing the mental health side of that, kind of the marriage of um,
Yeah.
the mental element and their progressions or digressions or stagnation with how they're performing. That's a piece of what we do. One of the things that came up, and I thought about you, I had a meeting with it this past Friday, is that neuroscience has entered this world, and there's a company and a technology out there that want to integrate with us. I went there and they tested me where they put a belt around you and you have a breathing apparatus, and you're creating a baseline, and it's counterintuitive to how you breathe to essentially you're off balance, right? And it shows us in a graph. And they also have a monitor on me for my heart rate, right? And the equation is how to get the person. Now they're doing it in sports. They're doing it with NFL teams. They're doing it now at the collegiate athletic level. And we're early. I'm excited about it. The drive is to figure out a baseline, and for student athletes, students, it's way beyond just athletics, understanding how to normalize their breathing and how to approach that because they have data that shows literally better grades. They have an example on free throw shooting that they could equate. They teach them essentially. They do a baseline. Some people do well, some people do terribly, and then they teach them how to do this, and it's with data, right? That they can see, and then they put them in adverse situations. NFL quarterbacks, um, snipers with bullets flying over their heads in the military. Pretty amazing, right?
It
Uh,
is.
it is.
Fascinating.
It's fascinating.
Fascinating.
That and see, you talk about problem and solution and the world of using, I'm going to call it intelligence, right? People can say the word technology. Well, what technology, right? At the end of the day, you utilize intelligence or technology to drive intelligence, to make more informed decisions, right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
maybe if you go back to your world and if you had some mental health intelligence, you had something very intuitive and you had a great team that was part of this, right? Your stakeholder team, the psychologist, Father Rob Hagen, et cetera. Um, but wouldn't you love to marry essentially, that skill set or, that art? It sounds, they're
Yeah.
kind of artists with data,
Right.
with intelligence,
Definitely.
right? To validate that. Um,
Definitely.
One last thing, Jay. I do like to ask everybody who comes on. There's two last questions, rather. One is, what did you do when you were coaching? When now you're a teacher and you're developing these human beings for all the things you just mentioned. But let's be honest, you're driving hard. You're running all around the place. You're coaching. You're recruiting, right? You're balancing that element of it, which I'm always impressed by coaches who, are with their players, doing everything they can do organizationally to maximize output. and then you're talking to people on the phone, you're hitting the road, you're going to a high school basketball game or whatever it is, right? You're moving 1,000 miles an hour.
You reminded me why I retired.
Well, I'm interested in this because you've got the 2020 goggles now to look back. And the question is, how did you keep yourself, I'll use our company's name, on balance?
You all the things you were just talking about are so fascinating to me because we had our team doing yoga way before that was popular.
Wow.
Because of the mindset and the breathing, and I still do yoga to this day. And what I struggle with the most, shouldn't say struggle with, but what I need to get better at is my breathing. And for myself, it was always the same thing, like simple things like I learned my mind was racing so much the night before the game when I was a younger coach. I would be coming up with new ideas and watching more film the night before the game and coming up with new ideas for the next day in shoot around to bring to my team that I thought would help us beat our opponent. When I realized very quickly, I'm confusing these guys the next day. It's great strategy, but their minds have to be clear. Everything the day of the game has to be consistent with what we did the day before so they can play with a clear mind and rely on their habits and their natural abilities. So I used to have to go to the movies with my wife the night before the game to keep myself from watching film and to keep myself from confusing everybody else.
Yeah, yeah.
So there were all kind of little mental games I was playing with myself to keep myself calm and keep myself in a position where I was positively impacting the mentality. I had a team psychologist, Dr. Jim Brennan, who was as valuable as any player. And I'd have him watching me all the time and telling me how my actions were impacting different players and how my actions were impacting the team. And I remember one game against Syracuse, I freaked out on the team at halftime because we were up at halftime, but we had blown a 10-point lead and we were only up 2 because we played poorly at the end of the first half. And I went in and freaked out. And then we lost in the second half. And he said to me after the game, you lost that game for the team.
Wow.
He said, your explosion at halftime did not get you the response that you wanted from the team in the second half. It satisfied your frustration, but that didn't do any good for the team.
Because
so
it was
having
demoralizing? Is that
because he watched us all the time and he said, they're trying to please you. They didn't purposely play poorly at the end of the first half. You were just frustrated that your team looked bad and you were embarrassed in how they played. So you were just reacting to frustration. You didn't give them anything positive to improve the poor play at the end of the first half. You just got your frustrations out.
Right.
And it was good honesty, and I needed to hear it. And I was always open to that, which I count as a blessing. There's a great book by Ryan Holiday that is Ego is the Enemy. And it's any person that's in charge, having people around you, they're just telling you all the things you do well.
Right.
If you're in charge and you're pretty successful, you don't need to hear what you do well. You've got enough confidence to know what you're doing. You need somebody to always analyze you and keep you humble and hungry. And that's what I always did. I always tried to have people around me that would tell me the truth. And I was always trying to evaluate myself that way.
Is there somebody or several people that have been most inspirational to you in your life, which also had maybe an impact on your success in your career?
Definitely my dad. My dad was a football, baseball guy. And what I learned at a young age from him was he always cared about the guys on the team that were the least productive and were kind of the weak link. And he
Wow.
always spent extra time with them. And I'd get frustrated with sometimes, like, why are you putting this guy in the game? Like we only have in baseball, we only have a 2-run lead. It was never basketball. Like, why are you putting him in? And he'd always say, like, if we don't get him better at the end of the year, we're only going to be as good as our weakest link. It's going to be, it's going to affect us in the end of the year. And it also showed every kid on the team that he cared about everybody. And I didn't like it when I was young, but invariably, like, that kid would come up with a play at the end of the year in the playoffs that was phenomenal that no one expected because my dad had spent time with him all year. And it always made me think of the guys on the end of the bench, the guys that were not getting playing time. Even when we won, there was no reason to praise the guy that was the leading scorer, the guy that played 30 minutes. It was the guys that didn't play or the guys that had a tough game. They're the guys that are just as impactful to the team that you had to spend time with and make sure they were feeling good about themselves. And they saw a vision where they were going to improve and they were going to get better and they were of value to the team.
Wow, that's tremendous that you. It sounds like that had just based on everything you shared in terms of developing for people for life and for life's lessons as well as performance. Sounds like that was the foundation.
I think it was.
Well, I want to thank you so much for joining today. It was, an honor for me to have you and to have our Athletes on Balance audience. We've got coaches out there, athletes out there, and people that are interested to hear what people that have achieved so much like yourself have to say about this important matter. I mean, um, you know, as a sign off on this, we're trying to raise awareness to destigmatize and normalize, simply so people go get care sooner. I mean, that's what this program's about. So, thank you, Jay. To our audience out there, be well. This is Walt Norley, and this is On Balance. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Walt.